Great to see you all here. Thank you for joining us, Jana. Today is our EOcafe with, you know the format of the EOcafe now, but just for those who don't, it's an informal meeting. We put it together where the EO community can meet during this the time of lack of travel. As things are opening up, I hope we'll have more opportunities to meet physically, but for the moment we carry on with our virtual meetings, and we'll continue with the EOcafe because it seems to be quite popular. Normal rules: please keep your microphones off until unless I ask you to come in. You're very welcome to keep your cameras on. It's nice to see people and to feel that there are more people in the room with us. Please, if you want to ask a question, and we hope you do, then please put it into the chat. We'll follow the chat, and I will call on you to ask the questions. I'll ask you to place it directly rather than reading it out. So I think that's essentially the rules. We should carry on for 45 minutes, maybe an hour maximum. And as you know, it's just an informal conversation. So I will talk with our guest, and then you can all join in later. So today I'm particularly pleased to welcome Jana Grigorian. Jana has recently taken up the post of Executive Director at the GEO Secretariat in Geneva. You will know that I've long been a supporter of GEO as an organization, which can help the industry. It's what, 18 years now, I guess GEO has essentially been since the very first meeting. GEO is the Group on Earth Observations. And where else do you find over 100 nations with an interest in EO data and services coming together to learn more about the technology and to work together on it? It makes a great platform for industry to engage with, at least in my opinion. And we'll explore this a bit further today. But Jana, first, maybe you can tell us a little about yourself, your background, and how did you first get involved in GEO?
Well, thanks very much, Jeff, and good afternoon, everybody. It's really nice to see faces. Thanks for putting on your cameras. And what a great idea. Oh, there you go. More cameras on. Yay, I love that. Hi, everyone. And what a great idea, really, to do this EOcafe as we're all kind of stranded in our respective worlds, although movement is beginning. So that's very exciting. So a few words about me, I guess. I came to GEO through a path that I don't think anyone had really designed. I was born and raised in Armenia. I was born in Armenia when it was still USSR. I became a young adult when it was no longer a USSR. My first sort of career was in the area of international development. I worked with the Red Cross. I loved it. I loved working with the local communities. There were a lot of underprivileged communities, and I knew I wanted to work with people. At school, I did not like science. I was not good at it. I swore that I would never come close to science, but I was good at the people thing. And so then I ended up in the United States through a certain course of events. I received a degree in international politics, and then through a really amazing program called Presidential Management Fellowship, I ended up in the US federal government at National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. I knew they were scientific organizations, so I don't know what I thought when I got into it, but I'm glad I did, because that put me on the path to becoming a member of the GEO community. So I got involved in the world of GEO in 2009, and I never left it. And I like working with the scientists. I realized it's not as scary as I thought it to be growing up. There were certain revelations when I joined GEO, as in, what do you mean science doesn't underpin all policy decisions? Really? And so it really made sense to be part of the community that works towards ensuring that environmental science and authoritative environmental information actually underpins decisions that are being made on behalf of the citizens, for the benefit of the citizens. And I think that's an enduring mission, which is why GEO is still here 16 years after it's been conceived. And coming to this position after many years of being involved as part of the US delegation, as part of the working community, is really a privilege for me, because it gives me an opportunity to really connect with all of the stakeholder communities that I've been long identifying as being absolutely key pieces in this puzzle if we are to achieve that vision we set out, and as our governments actually set out now with ambitious targets, which are just getting nearer and nearer. And I think all of us truly find ourselves, governments, private sector, academia, civil society, are finding ourselves in this unique moment in time when all kinds of momentum has really built up. I once used this analogy of sort of this perfect wave. I'm not a surfer, but somehow I imagine that you train for that perfect wave and you want to catch it. And Jan Ramborg is going to tease me now that I use this analogy again. But I feel like we all need to catch this wave to actually get us to where we want to be by 2030, by 2050. And we all have things to bring to this exercise. And so I'm just so really happy and privileged to be in this space, in this position, to be able to help convene these partnerships and extend the work that we've started several years ago. And I very much appreciate Jeff Ersk's involvement under your leadership, and now even as you've transitioned, to help us really build out this vision. So that's all about me.
We'll come on to talk more about that in a minute. I tend to think more about the perfect golf swing. I always remember, it must be 15 years ago now, I was taking some lessons and the coach said, you know, that was the best swing you'll ever make. And I thought, how the hell can he know that? But I think he was right, in fact. So I can relate to the perfect wave, although I'm certainly not a surfer. It's certainly a complex puzzle, that's for sure. And I think personally at GEO is an important piece of that puzzle. Maybe we can talk more about. But just carrying on a little bit the theme, you've moved from Washington to Geneva, from the US to Europe. Now you must have visited Geneva many thousands of times in your previous role, but it's very different to live there. How are you settling in Geneva?
I think, can I just say, I think I'm one lucky woman, because I came to this new job, new life, knowing the people. And I think it's really the people, right, that make you feel comfortable and warm and fuzzy. And I came into this team that has long felt like a family. And they really made this transition really as easy as one could hope for a transition like this to be. So I hit the ground running as far as work is concerned. We were able to really go at it. As far as consolidating life, it's taking a minute, maybe more than a minute. I'm finding Switzerland is not as efficient as everyone makes it out to be. Some things are actually just very much a myth. So yeah, that part of the transition is still happening. I miss my kids every day, but you know,
sure,
it comes with the territory. And
yeah. You've got your internet installed. That's often the one of the hardest things. Yeah. Okay. You're taking over from Gilberto Camaro. Previously, it's been a post that was filled firstly by Josie Ash and then Barbara Ryan, who is still very much present. Gilberto brought a very scientific and technical approach to GEO, after perhaps the diplomatic and inclusive approach from Barbara. What sort of approach do you see yourself bringing?
I mentioned earlier that I'm a people person. And so for me, I think what I do is I bring that, the keen awareness, the acute awareness that if we are to achieve what we're building up to, we need to be communicating. And I'm a communicator. I'm not saying I'm a professional communicator, but I am a communicator. And so I see the communication, the interaction with the various communities, getting out of the comfort zone, actually not being shy to try the language spoken by others and not our inner circle, an exciting challenge. And so I see everything kind of being like this perfect relay, with Jose, who came and he set up shop and he established the beginnings and the foundation of our early impressive initiatives, like the Global Forest Observation Initiative started under his leadership. Then Barb came and she really built out the community. Then Gilberto came and he really put the emphasis on he started a movement of open knowledge and open science, developing the capabilities that will help to promote that and empower developing countries worldwide. And all of that was possible because the predecessor had put certain pieces into motion. And so I come in now and I contend that while this is all great, people are not going to sniff these things out and come find us. We actually do need to go out and communicate what we do, as well as communicate with those who are eager to partner with us to take things from research to operations, to take things from that science-based, steeped in research, development and incubation of applications and services, and actually turn them into operational services so that countries can achieve their aspirational goals. And I think that's where the private sector comes in terms of working with the GEO community to understand, through our network of 113 governments being involved, what those governments' needs are, what really presents perhaps lowest hanging fruit or a complete gap that's not being filled anywhere by anyone, and then use our work as the basis, and then bring the capability of the industry, the agility of the industry, and really turn those things into the services that the decision makers, and not just the governments, but decision makers in the business sector as well, can utilize on a routine basis to support their routine operations and routine decisions.
Mm-hmm. You sort of anticipate my next question regarding the private sector.
I'm also clairvoyant.
Ah, brilliant! Yeah. So
I bet Gilberto couldn't say that.
So let's move on and explore that a little bit further, because I mean, Barbara was very keen on the engagement with the private sector and started, I think it was in Iguazu, the first movement to try to bring the private sector on board. ERSC with the US Association led by Nancy Colleton at the time, we'd proposed private sector engagement with GEO from the beginning, but it's clear it wasn't the time. There was a time necessary to get the governments around the table to understand, to start to get a common direction going. So here we are, as you said, 16 years later. I think recently there have been some very strong moves with the private sector. We were a very enthusiastic supporter of what was done in Australia with the industry track, and I think that was a great instrument, a tool for bringing the private sector in. And I certainly hope it's something that we can continue to support. So what practically do you see happening to bring the private sector into engagement with the GEO Secretariat, but more importantly, with the 113 national members, government members that you have?
Oh, there's a lot there. So let's unpack. You're not wrong about us having taken quite some time to get to where we are. And as a matter of fact, I know exactly, it took us 5 years to get, almost 5 years, to even go from where we put for the first time in 2012 the word out there that GEO should be partnering with the private sector. I remember it was plenary in Brazil, and then it took us another almost 4 or 5 years to actually create an GEO Associate category. And I'll toot my own horn here, but partly chief architect of that policy right here. And why was it important? Because it institutionalized the idea that the private sector was going to be and was needed to be a partner and part of this GEO family. So I remember there were times when I was asking myself, why are we taking such a long time? Do we then need even to, go after creating this category? And I think now we're realizing that absolutely, just having even that institutional framework that allows for a private entity to become formally associated with GEO, to claim that relationship, we've built a culture within GEO that is welcoming to this public-private partnership. So setting the context, that policy framework was very important. It then kind of allowed us to really proceed with more rigor to seek out those partnership opportunities. And look, private sector has been involved in GEO for quite some time, even before we created that label and that category. But it wasn't it wasn't really at scale. It wasn't really global. It was sort of a few entities here and there. So since, and when did we start this? In 2019, perhaps, we indeed were able to create new types of partnerships with some of the larger technology providers in terms of this cloud credits programs, which provided access, extended access to compute technologies to countries in the developing the global south, especially, including some non-member countries. It really created a new community of technical users who were happy to get this access to big Earth data and begin to develop nationally relevant, locally relevant applications. And then, as you mentioned, also in parallel, we began to create this environment through the industry track in Australia, which we've now continued last year as well, virtual industry track. And mind you, this year we'll have an industry track as well. And I do hope that European companies will participate. But we've created effectively this environment where this conversation continues. And the conversation, I think, ought to be not just business to business, but business to government, because I do think that's the attractiveness and the value proposition to the private sector, that through engaging with GEO as a forum of governments, they really can be tailoring development of services towards actual needs of the public sector. I know there is always apprehension with the risk that is involved in making new investments, and there is always a desire to identify measures for de-risking those investments. And I don't think GEO can bring all of the measures and solutions to this, but at least creating an environment where these conversations can develop so that a private entity has sort of an anchor customer at the end of the day when the service is developed, goes in the direction of helping to de-risk some of those investments. I think it's easier to accomplish this partnership in places where there is already an industry sort of developed, like in Europe, through efforts of the European Commission and ERSC. There's definitely the movement there, right? That's kind of building up the industry. In other parts that infrastructure doesn't exist and it's harder. And that is where we need to rely on our members as well to be the conduit and to actually bring their industry representatives into the conversation. So where we cannot reach, our members really ought to be participating in bridging that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that really is the strongest. You don't need to sort of help justify or solve investment decisions. That's for the industry to do. But what you can do is help create the conditions where industry can take the decisions on investment. And I long believe also that where industry is not so present, GEO can play an enabling role there, maybe a sort of an information role, something to help those countries that are looking to develop some capability to how best to do that, to provide some guidelines, to provide some templates, some examples. And certainly we shall be very shortly publishing our latest industry survey of the industry in Europe. And we're happy that the industry is growing, continues to grow quite strongly, and measures being put in place by the Commission, by ESA, by member states are helping that. So they are enabling the growth, and it's coming along. Just let me wind back a little bit, because I guess we've talked about associate membership, but there may be a lot of people on the call, companies even on the call, who are not aware what that actually means. Could you just very quickly explain what an associate member is and what their rights are, what they get?
I'll do that if you promise also then to go back to what we were just talking about earlier, because I want to say something else and sound it out with the participants on the call. So associates, GEO has, the GEO family has 3 categories currently in it: GEO members, who are the governments that represent member countries. We have participating organizations, who are international and regional level organizations that have a mandate in using Earth observation, providing Earth observation. They can be anywhere on the value chain. There can be in the policy, domain, philanthropy, technical, etc. And then we have a GEO Associate category, which is reserved for commercial and civil society entities that operate on the national scale. The participating organizations also, by the way, include professional societies and nonprofit associations of private sector and commercial sector, such as ERSC. But if there are individual companies that seek individual sort of association and affiliation with GEO, then that's what the GEO Associate category is for. Now, it's not just a label. What this usually entails is a certain amount of time and effort, and sometimes it's a monetary value, having been invested in the partnership with GEO, either directly or through support to key GEO activities or regional GEO networks. We've defined that requirement sort of time frame by a period of 2 years. And we look to these companies, the organizations, to define the kind of self-funded contribution that they will make to the advancement of the mission of GEO. So that's what associate represents.
Before winding back to your enigmatic question you want to come to, we've discussed, and implicit in what you're saying there is you're talking about contributions coming from the associate members. One of our concerns, and I think you share the concern, is to make sure that SMEs can find their place in this. And in that structure, it may not be so easy for an SME to be able to commit to the expense, to commit to the offering something into the community. How do we protect and encourage the participation of SMEs?
Actually, you may be a bit clairvoyant yourself, Jeff, because where I was going with this was in fact, specifically thinking about, as we talked earlier, about the areas of the world and the countries where there isn't a robust industry, there aren't large companies, and where there are, small and medium or micro to a size companies that are just beginning to develop. As I think about how do we get them to be involved in the space, and I'm not talking about geospace, but just in general in the whole Earth observation domain, I can't help but think that, usually those are also countries where we probably don't have the most active engagement of the countries themselves, of the governments. And so this year, as I was getting ready to come into the job, I really began to seriously consider designing accelerators that would actually bring in the governments, sort of co-designing these accelerators with governments who represent the government need and their local, industry representatives, small companies at the table, with GEO providing, first of all, access to data, public data, the countries who define the need, if we can sort of communicate through why certain service is important, what kind of decisions it can help inform, thereby creating an incentives for these government entities and other local entities to share also local data if they are convinced that the service that will be developed will actually make use of all these data for their national level decision making. And using the GEO community as a way, to provide mentoring and coaching through this accelerator phase. I mean, accelerator concept is not a novel concept, obviously, everybody understands and knows this, but we haven't quite done that in GEO. And I am really considering it, and I have one sort of first accelerator in my mind that I'm trying to conceptualize, is to use this as a way to bring in this whole ecosystem of stakeholders, from sort of the science side to make sure that whatever is developed is actually using peer-reviewed science, best science out there, but also government and those small companies sort of working together to develop the kinds of solutions that will benefit a very specific sort of end user community in that country, in maybe sub-regionally. We will, I think, to be successful as I envision it, if I can figure out a model where we can create a number of those, perhaps in a number of regions, in a number of developing countries, and seek seed funding to enable the execution of these accelerators to the point where the small and medium companies can develop solutions that can be market ready or have a market potential. Then, of course, the forces of the market, et cetera, will need to take their turn. And I'm hoping that as GEO also is working to create a robust and systematic conversation with the finance industry, in order to ensure that the financing becomes available to solutions and businesses that are making use of environmental information, that are underpinned by environmental information, then the ability of these prototype services to then get access to funding to go to scale or to go to market will be easier. So that's the idea that I have in my mind. Create a set of accelerators around a very concrete need, around a very concrete problem that brings to the table governments who have access to local data, the industry, and the right parts of the GEO community to provide the right level of mentoring and advice, and seed money, and see what happens.
to use the expression you used earlier, there's an awful lot to unpack there.
Yeah, so shoot your targets at the ideal, because I want to hear it.
Yeah, I think the sort of the global concept, I think, is great. I think we need to discuss a bit more how it can work. I think the you talk about mentoring and education and training in there. I think that's very important. I think learning how to access finance, and so there's a big challenge for GEO there, but learning how a small company looking to establish itself in a country which is not so familiar with the use of EO services, I think some acceleration, some help of how to solve that problem is required. The key thing, of course, is to bring user needs. Mm-hmm. And to work with the governments to understand what problems they have, and then to turn their problems into solutions using Earth observation. So that's no doubt the sort of the key part of that process. So this is a new idea, from what I understand. Yeah,
breaking news right here.
Breaking news.
You heard it here first at the Earth EOcafe.
Wow, we feel very privileged. GEO, you talk about raising finance there. GEO is, I mean, it's an informal international organization, which really causes a lot of problems, and I've been in some of the discussions around this point. Do you see the statutes of GEO changing in some way to solve the problem of continuity, to solve the problem of where does the money come from? And yeah, do you see that changing?
I did say I was clairvoyant, right? But even my clairvoyance has its limits. You know, I think we're going to find out soon enough when we design GEO 3.0. I mean, we toyed with this idea in 2015 when we were sort of looking to renew our mandate. And there were very practical considerations for why we chose not to pursue an independent legal entity. I'm just going to take the easy way out here and say, I think this is going to be up to the members to really figure out. I mean, look, there are trade-offs in whichever way we go. Yeah. You know, the fact that we have been informal and the fact that we have been this kind of an agile forum has given us this unique space where we can actually rather quickly do things and test things out, and that holds an enormous value. You know, sure, the trade-off is it's harder for us to, you know, go after government contributions, national contributions, but I would say I envision that the future of GEO is going to ride on more than just what the governments put in. It is really going to ride on how we leverage the full potential of the commitments and the contributions that are being put into the space by the philanthropists, by the individual donors, by the multilateral funding mechanisms. It will no doubt require us to adapt to be able to play in that space. But does it mean we really need to change our statutes? I don't know that necessarily means that. So I would say, I think we should like extend this rubber band as far as we can, because I do believe inherently it does offer us some real unique advantages that other organizations with legal mandates don't necessarily have.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I mean, from experience, changing statutes is hard. It's a very tortuous process, takes an awful lot of energy and time. just a reminder to everyone, please, if you have questions for Jana, please put them into the chat. I don't see any questions there in the moment. I see a nice comment.
Yes, thank you. That's so nice to hear.
But surely there must be some questions that you can put into the chat. So I guess let's talk about ERSC and what. Sorry, the screen's changed. What can we do? We work with you. What do you want us to do more of?
Well, a number of things I think we can do together. No, this is on your end. There's nothing that I did. Okay, sorry.
No, it's our operations that are time for questions. Yeah.
So well, a number of things. Like I just said, right? I think if we can show that this concept of using GEO as a platform where the industry can sort of get ideas and inspiration for new kind of innovation can actually take place that then fits the needs of various users, that's definitely a thing to do together. And really, I know that with the European Commission and through the robust funding programs that funds participation of industry in developing sort of solutions and innovating, that work is already taking place. But to what degree we can use that and inspire the other countries to be willing to enter that space as well, I think it's good to explore that. And to that end, I have to say, and thanks to Emmanuel as well, being involved in the industry track is just one of those steps. But what we want to do is not even treat these industry tracks as one-off events that happen once a year, but really build out on the outcomes of these events and put in motion a systematic kind of an engagement. Through ERSC's work, we can have a better understanding of the industry, downstream industry needs. I think that is one area and space where we GEO still haven't quite gone far enough, understanding how do we convert the downstreams or operational economic sector industry into insatiable users of Earth observation, the agriculture sector, the energy sector, the supply chain for logistics. They are so primed to use geospatial information and Earth observation for their operations, right? So how do we truly understand how to serve their needs better so that they can rival the governments as the anchor customer for Earth observation? Because I think if they do become a super users of Earth observation, they will be willing to fund and help with the whole de-risking of innovation for the industry. That's what I contend. And again, I think I really am excited by the conversations we are starting to build out with the industry. We just had the first climate finance workshop, for example. I hope some of you tuned into that workshop. It was a climate policy and finance workshop, a 3-day event, and on day 3, we talked to the entities that provide finance for for various climate actions, and insurance industry was among the representatives of the finance sector. Mm-hmm. And it's our sort of entry into this foray, but there are a lot more such conversations that I think need to take place with the building and infrastructure industry. Like I said, agriculture, energy, supply chain. To me, I think those are probably the largest users of geospatial and Earth observation. So I think ERSC had conducted a number of activities to understand their needs, if I'm not mistaken, through the Fire Forum. Was it Fire Forum?
Yes.
Right.
The fire forum, where we looked at 6 different sectors and brought them together to sort of understand better, structuring their needs, informing them on the state of the art, and having a good conversation. The fire forum itself was. We'd seen it as a big event last summer, which unfortunately got hijacked by the COVID crisis. Hopefully, we still held a virtual forum, but of course, it's nothing like a physical forum. And certainly next year, we shall hope to have a major physical forum. But just I mean, within our survey, we look each time at the structure of the market and where the customers are. And consistently, the public sector is more than 50% of the market. And people say, okay, that's great. So there's a lot of growth possible on the commercial side. From what I see, there's a lot of growth potential on the public side. When we were talking in preparation, I mentioned one of my bugbears at the moment is this institutionalization of EO services and public organizations that use it, but it's very ad hoc. It's not sort of embedded in the organization. And I think that's an area where a lot of work can be done. I don't have the answer. I don't know what the solution is, but we need to make sure that, or we need to encourage Earth observation technology, information services to be more widely used amongst public agencies and public organizations. And I understand it's a slow process because they're adjusting their processes. But it's very clear from the studies that we do that this is an enduring problem. So yes for the commercial side, but sort of double yes for the public side as a genuine user of Earth observation services.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think we can claim victory in that. And especially in the low and middle income countries, especially in the low income countries, that's still very much the need. And I mean, there the need goes to the topics where we actually even skipped, right? Yeah. We're talking about services, and through our regional conversations, we hear from the users, technical users in those countries, that they are still needing help with just managing data. Absolutely. So then really the whole discussion about creating open knowledge becomes that much more important. That engagement with the organizations like the Open Geospatial Consortium to ensure that we are really developing sort of open standards for use of the multi-source data and technologies becomes a reality. So it's not just one data infrastructure and then you don't know what to do once you add another dimension to it. And then the agencies really making the serious shift towards analysis ready data. Yeah. So that those same technical users in the least developed countries don't have to go through the pain of processing and correcting all the data, but can actually turn to sort of analysis. So yeah, we kind of skipped over that, as some people would say, unsexy part of the conversation, but these fundamentals are still very much important.
A lot of commercial suppliers also dealing with analysis ready data, so it's it's a technology trend. Jeff, good to see you. Come in.
Hello, I'm the other Jeff. Yeah.
Yes, hi Jeff.
Hi. Yeah. No, unfortunately I don't know everything that GEO does, but listening to the conversation, and also I've made contact with the GEO Blue Planet people recently on a project that I'm doing. But I was just wondering if there's a role for GEO in kind of reaching across boundaries for particularly environmental issues that can affect lots of countries, that may get dealt with perhaps by the governments of the wealthier countries, but then the smaller nations are less likely to respond. I'm just thinking of things like the Allen Coral Atlas, where standard products which can support lots of governments and local authorities are produced to deal with that issue. And I'm working on something with sargassum in the Caribbean, where there's lots of small island nations. And how can we, maybe GEO could be there promoting, the establishment of these sort of standard products and services to support multiple countries, and then maybe get them more interested in EO that way as well.
Thanks for that question, Jeff. And I think Stephen and I are actually trying to set up a conversation with you that's not unrelated to this. But I'll say this, it's funny because I think when GEO first started with its first work program, there was a lot of emphasis on developing global products. Some of the things we've done, comes to mind sort of the global land unit, global land units product that was done under the auspices of, well, it had a different name then, but now it's a GeoEco activity. Then there was the global marine ecosystem units, also global product, the global land cover products. And what we then, a few years later, began to hear was this whole shift from, you have to go from global to local because that's where the action is. And so we went like, okay, so then let's go down this funnel path. And we then kind of focused on regional applications and development of regional scale capabilities, including regional data infrastructures, and then regional services or continental services, such as Digital Earth Australia, Digital Earth Africa, and the various applications that they are also developing. Similarly, though, our global agriculture monitoring initiative that really started by putting out the global crop monitor, then began to also pivot. Well, they didn't pivot because they're still doing the global crop monitor, but then they really also started to develop the more localized early warning kind of systems for countries to be able to actually monitor the crop activity, agricultural activity. So it's been kind of a mix, I think, because indeed, what we're hearing is having the global product is great, but it does come with the limitations when you really want to support decision making, because you can't always just downscale it. And so I think in that lies the dilemma, which way do we really go? So I would like to continue this conversation with you and see, as you know, we are partnering with NICFI in terms of trying to get them to do more capacity development and reach more governments. We're already in talks with Planet for support to small island developing states, indigenous communities. But I think that whole value chain, that whole construct will have to be carefully thought out, because we will need to work with the national or at least regional level users for them to be able to use all of that cool data that's coming through programs like NICFI. So maybe it's not a question of either or, there's value in the global work, but there is definitely the need for more localized national scale applications.
Yeah, I think just one follow on to that. I think in the last sort of 5 years, it's really changed that we can get to local scales with globally available data sets now, with things like the Sentinel-2 data set at 10 meters, but yet global coverage over quite a short time period. So we're moving into a new environment. So I think some of those issues and questions can now be readdressed and reevaluated.
So then I indeed take me up on my offer, and let's figure out what that looks like.
That's great. Thank you.
Steve was here a moment ago, but seems to have
I know he left me to fend with it.
Left you alone. Anyway, that's a nice lead in. Any more questions? I noticed today, this is a little bit left screen. There was an appeal for an art exhibition, or invites to submit art. I don't know if we got any budding Rembrandts on the call, but just tell us a little bit more about that. What's behind it?
Yeah, you asked me what I bring to GEO. That's what I bring to GEO. Look, I said I'm a communicator, and I love all forms of communication. And through my life experiences, I've learned that sometimes it all goes to this point that I made about sort of us finding a common language to be able to speak to communities that don't speak our language. And there's a lot of talk within GEO and in other places in terms of affecting change and affecting impact, needing to engage civil society, needing to engage citizens, needing to engage the youth. We haven't talked about that just yet. How do we communicate this complex topic, this heavy technical topic to, you know, with these communities? And so I thought, why not try art? And just try to humanize this, you know, oftentimes heavy topic that's usually associated with some doom and gloom and environmental collapse and cataclysm, etc., and put it into a format that doesn't trivialize it, but still sort of humanizes it, and see what are the people's experiences out there, and get them interested and get them involved. So this is definitely an experiment. I'm looking forward to see what comes out of it, and then we can build on that, figure out how can this help us with our communication, with our storytelling. How do we bring the young people into this community and interested? We have some really cool judges. Hopefully that will help with the incentives, etc. And we are, you know, I'm expecting anything from doodling to amazing oil on canvas, to you name it.
We have a couple of companies. We had them on the EOcafe a few weeks ago, talking about computer games and gaming as a communication tool. And that might be an interesting line to think about. But art, yeah, I mean, it's a way of getting people involved and getting people interested, and it's what we need.
Next, I'm going to try song competition. So get ready for that.
Well, don't expect me in an art competition or a singing competition. Definitely not. Gabor has put a question in around the SDGs, if I read it correctly. Gabor?
Good afternoon. My question is for Jana. How do you see the opportunities and potentials of the Earth observation to support and accelerate the accomplishment of the SDGs?
All right, and are you not going to demystify the remainder of your question? Because I'm not sure MFTTT, what does MFTTT stand for?
Yes, this is an abbreviation of the Hungarian Society for Surveying, Mapping and Remote Sensing, the working group on SDGs.
All right, okay. Thank you. So I'm understanding you did not ask, I'm glad you didn't ask, how can we help provide information for monitoring, reporting on indicators? Because to me, that's one thing, the whole government reporting on indicators and targets. But the question, accomplishment of those goals that we set, that's a whole different ballgame. And that's really the question, right? I think we just really need, we're seeing a situation where everyone is talking about SDGs, the public sector, the private sector. Our work in that space through our activities with the UN GGIM and the statistical and mapping agencies of some of the countries are definitely paving the way in bridging the statistical community and the Earth observation community. But again, it's not really happening yet at scale. So one of the things we are telling our principals, and we will be saying this in the GEO plenary come November 23rd, is that we need our government representatives to more actively connect with the statistical agencies so that we can bridge that conversation and accelerate the uptake of the methodologies that are being developed that will be integrated in with the statistical data for sort of tracking our achievement of the SDGs. So that's one thing. We are developing tools that are now even available in a form of a toolkit for some of the SDG targets and indicators. A number of them are being hosted by UN Habitat. These are the ones that are particularly relevant to resilient cities. We will be developing another set of toolkits for risk-related indicators and targets. But really going beyond the realm of indicators and targets, I think everything we're talking about collectively is going to help us get closer to achieving the targets where we are becoming, where there is, let me put it this way. You know that wedding cake diagram that puts SDGs in 3 tiers, right? Somehow I love the logic of it, right? That we first need to address kind of the biosphere, the land, the life below water and life on land. In order, once we ensure the vitality of the environment, then you can actually move up and ensure the vitality of the society, because without restored and secure environment, you can't just go about extracting things for society and for economy. So I think that represents a really good guide for us, the Earth observation community, where we need to really put emphasis in terms of developing tools that can inform decisions in the way that restore and preserve the equilibrium between our need for natural resources and the sensitivities of the environment. In an effort to achieve that sustainable development. So maybe not as concrete answer as you were looking for, but I think we are doing much in that space.
Thank you very much.
It triggers something else that I wanted to raise with you. Another initiative that I noticed that you're taking regarding COP26 and trying to put on the table some material to support the COP. Are you getting good support on that?
The email went out to 113 government principals and a lot, and 100 and I don't know how many, 30 organizations. I did not hear from 113 governments, but I really did hear from, a little bit less than a dozen, which to me shows, first of all, it was late in the game. So yeah. I knew that most of the governments were probably already quite a ways away in their national processes. But the fact that they responded with great support and interest really tells me that there is appetite to engage, and it is the job of the Secretariat to make it easy for the government. So this year we're using as okay, we were a little late, but we're setting up the conversation so that next year we're a lot more proactive and we sort of get on that on-ramp a lot sooner and develop the kinds of resources that our member countries will need to have the conversations with their negotiators, so that next year's COP really becomes the opportunity for us to get that mandate. Because I do think we are in the position to offer concrete, tangible input to UNFCCC processes, both through the global stocktake, but especially, and I do want to call out this work that we're doing with our agriculture initiative on developing practical guidance for countries to implement crop monitoring as part of their national adaptation plans.
Yeah.
And so this being our first effort, we're aiming to finish it by the end of the year, which would be really great. It will be reviewed by the least developed countries expert working group of UNFCCC. And if we do get a thumbs up in terms of it being in the right format, the right kind of content, then we will have a really good baseline on which to build more of such guidance mechanisms or guidance resources.
Yeah, it seems to me it's a marker this time, but it's a very important initiative, and something which I think is ideal for GEO to really develop and push and develop the dialogue, and as you say, understand if that's the right sort of style of information or if the language needs to be adapted and what needs to be done. That's great. We're at 5 o'clock. We've been going for 1 hour. Yeah, it's that's quite surprising. So
I'm still waiting for my coffee from the cafe.
No one's brought it to you. I'm sorry. Delphine's drinking it. You need to have a word with Steve, I think. It's been great, Jana. Thank you very much indeed. And I think we look forward to some more initiatives and some really great progress from GEO over the next few years. And I really look forward to continuing the conversation, and maybe we'll have another opportunity to do that. I really hope that in 2022 we'll have the opportunity for a physical GEO, a series of physical GEO meetings, in fact, but especially the GEO plenary next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any last comments you want to make before I close completely?
Yes, just one comment, maybe inspired by the last comment right there. You know, do actively and proactively reach out to us at the Secretariat. If you think we are not, we're not tracking something important, if there is a missing element in what we're doing, it's, we really would welcome that. And especially if you come to us to say, you're not doing this, and here's how we want to help you get there. So I very much would welcome that partnership. Thank you very much for having me over. It's been so nice seeing some familiar and unfamiliar new faces, and I hope to be back again.
And I hope you see them again. That would be great. We hope to see you again. Thanks, everyone. Special thanks to Jana there. A word, the next EOcafe will be, as usual, in 2 weeks' time, 4 o'clock on the 28th, I think it is. The subject is ecosystem accounting. We're looking at it as a crucial tool in measuring the progress towards the aims of the European Green Deal. So our objective is to present the concept to the European private sector and start involving them in developing ecosystem accounting solutions, which will continue to contribute to preserve and measure the conservation and restoration of Europe's natural capita. I know it's a subject which is also sometimes difficult to get grips with. I think it's gaining a lot of importance. So come and discuss that with us next time on the 21st of October. That's right, I got my dates wrong. And look forward to seeing lots of you then. As you know, we move from the formal part of the, another reminder for the workshop, 18th, 19th of November, a bit further away. This is something that I'm working on at the moment, looking at the results, some really, really good results, I say it myself, coming out of the SEB's work on how Copernicus is benefiting European citizens. So it will be, I think, an interesting and hopefully unusual workshop on the 18th, 19th of November. So put that one in your diary. That is the point. I'm going to close the formal, informal part of the cafe. As usual, anyone who wants to just hang around and talk, open microphones and talk, is very welcome to do so. And look forward to seeing many of you next time. And thank you, Jana.